Chapter 6. By the time she was shot in the head in an assassination attempt by the Taliban gunmen in October of 2012, 14-year-old Malala had been a leader in the fight for girls' education in Pakistan for more than 3 years. Malala began writing a blog under a pseudonym for the BBC at the age of 11. She detailed her life under Taliban rule, their control of the Swat Valley, and her advocacy for education for girls. After the Pakistan military ousted the militants from her region, Malala began speaking publicly. A New York Times documentary and interviews by both print and television media raised her profile further and put her in the direct aim of the Taliban. After life-saving surgeries in Pakistan following this shooting, Malala was flown to Birmingham, England, where she underwent numerous more surgeries and where, within 6 months, she returned to school. Malala's story illustrates that real leadership has less to do with making the use of other people than with serving other people. Placing others ahead of oneself is the key to successful leadership, whether in social activism, politics, war, education, sports, social services, or business. In this chapter, you will be learning to combine a rational approach to leadership with a concern for people and ethics. Understand how leaders set the ethical tone in organizations and recognize the distinction between ethical and unethical leadership. Recognize your own stage of moral development and ways to accelerate your moral maturation. Know and use mechanisms that enhance an ethical organizational culture. Apply the principles of stewardship and servant leadership. And recognize courage in others and unlock your own potential to live and act courageously. The names of once revered corporations such as AIG, the Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and Countrywide have become synonymous with greed, deceit, arrogance, or lack of moral conscience. Although the high-profile stories of ethical misconduct in organizations have slowed a bit, there are plenty of leaders still on the hot seat because of immoral or unethical behavior. Brian Dunn of Best Buy and Mike Hurd of Hewlett-Packard both resigned under pressure due to inappropriate relationships with female employees. Scott Thompson resigned as the CEO of Yahoo after only 4 months on the job because reports revealed he had inaccurately claimed on his resume that he had a degree in computer science. Ethics face many pressures that challenge their ability to do the right thing. The most dangerous obstacles for leaders are potential weakness and self-interest rather than full-scale corruption. Pressures to cut costs, increase profits, meet the demands of vendors or business partners, and look successful can all contribute to ethical lapse. Another challenge in today's environment is an overemphasis on pleasing shareholders, which may cause some managers to behave unethically toward customers, employees, and the broader society. Managers are under enormous pressure to meet short-term earnings goals, and some even use accounting gimmicks or other techniques to show returns that meet market expectations rather than ones that reflect true performance. Top leaders in particular are facing closer scrutiny because what goes on at the top sets the standard for the rest of the organization. In a study of Fortune 100 companies, fully 40% were found to have been engaged in activities that could be considered unethical. Researchers conclude that misdeeds could be traced to the failure of top executives to enforce and live up to ethical standards. Leaders can carry tremendous responsibility for setting the ethical climate and acting as positive role models for others. Leaders signal what matters through their behavior, and when leaders operate from principles of selfishness and greed, many employees come to see that type of behavior is okay. Leaders sometimes do the wrong thing just so they look good to others. The question for leaders is whether they can summon the fortitude to do the right thing despite outside pressure. Here's a story about ITT. ITT, a diversified global industrial corporation, was founded in the early 20th century. But when the corporation spun off its defense and water business in October of 2011, it essentially became a 100-year-old startup. As Chief Communications Officer Jennifer puts it, many companies would start building the brand by taking an external approach. But Jennifer's team and new CEO Denise Ramos took the opposite approach, building the company's reputation from the inside out with a culture of trust, engagement, and integrity. Ramos went on on a global listening tour, meeting with employees at all levels, sometimes individually or in small teams, other times in large town hall style gatherings. The result of all this listening was the ITT way, a code that encapsulates the core values of respect, responsibility, and integrity, and defines how the company uses them to meet the needs of employees, customers, business partners, shareholders, and the communities where ITT operates. Ethical leaders aren't preoccupied with their own importance. They keep the focus on employees, customers, and the greater good rather than taking every opportunity to satisfy their self-interest, feed their greed, or nourish their egos. Unethical leaders typically pay more attention to gaining benefits for themselves rather than the company or the larger society. Ethical leaders are honest with employees, partners, vendors, and shareholders. They strive for fairness, and they take care to honor their agreements or commitments to others. Unethical leaders, on the other hand, often practice deception. Ethical leaders tend to share the credit for success and accept the blame when things go wrong, whereas unethical leaders often take credit for followers, accomplishments, and diminish the dignity of others by treating people with discourtesy and disrespect. Ethical leaders help followers develop their potential and have a role in decision-making, whereas unethical leaders often see followers as a means to an end. Finally, one of the primary ways leaders contribute to an ethical organization is by speaking up against acts they believe are wrong. If a leader knows someone is being treated unfairly by a colleague and does nothing, the leader is setting a precedent for others to behave unfairly as well. Leaders turn a blind eye to such behavior because most managers have a natural inclination to protect the organization. In addition, leaders have to fight against a tendency for people to see what they want to see, not what they don't want to see, and to hope a problem will go away on its own. A tendency that causes leaders to make decisions that later come to be seen by others as ethically indefensible.